I've spent loads of time now with the iPad Air 4 and the iPad Mini 6. They're both really similar iPads, apart from the size. So, which one's right for you? Hello and welcome back to Ellis Reviews, and thank you for subscribing if you have, and if you haven't subscribed, yes, you know where the button is. So one of the problems with being a tech YouTuber, there aren't many by the way, it's a fantastic thing to do, is that you get your hands on lots of different devices which constantly changes your opinion of what's best. Now I get picked up on this, I quite often say, oh, the iPad Air 4 has been my favourite iPad ever, and then suddenly, the iPad Mini 6 is now my favourite iPad ever. Now these are unrealistic scenarios because no one needs this many iPads. But that got me thinking, with these two iPads being so ridiculously similar and having influenced my work and my life so much, there's clearly an interesting battle going on between these two iPads. In fact, if you're not bothered about the iPad Pro at all, the iPad Mini and the iPad Air represent a really interesting buying decision. Right, starting with price, the iPad Mini 6 starts at $499, which I think is $100 or £100 too expensive. The iPad Air starts at $599, which I think is about right. They both have the same weird storage options, and they're weird because the new iPhone 13 starts at 128 gigabytes. Now both the iPad Air and the iPad Mini start at 64 gig, which is a really odd decision from Apple. It feels like it was made way before they confirmed the storage levels for the iPhone 13. I think it should start at 128, just like the iPhone. But those prices I mentioned a moment ago are for the 64 gig versions of these iPads. Now, the only other option you have with them both is to go up to 256 gigabytes, which adds an additional $150 to the price. That creates a bit of an issue for the iPad Air because the top end price for this pushes it quite close to the price of the 11-inch iPad Pro. And actually, if you spend an additional $50, you could go up to that 11-inch iPad Pro. You'd have to drop down to 128 gig of storage, but you'd have technically a more powerful iPad. So really the point of this is that these aren't cheap iPads. If you want a cheap iPad, go for the 9th generation normal iPad, which is just a superb device for the money. But given the price of these two devices, I think there are three decisions you need to make. Now I think the 11-inch-ish screen size on the iPad Air 4 is just about the perfect screen size for a do-it-all iPad. And when I say do-it-all iPad, I mean an iPad that you can watch stuff on and that you can use alongside a keyboard case like the Magic Keyboard to turn it into a kind of semi-laptop. Big enough not to be too unwieldy if you're just holding it like this, but equally you can get quite a lot done in split screen mode on iPadOS. Now the iPad Mini has a 8.3-inch screen, which is pretty small. It does push it dangerously close towards smartphone territory, but it's not a smartphone. I've heard a few people say, how do I turn my iPad Mini into a phone? I don't know why you'd want to do that. It's a bit of these are phones, that's the size a phone should be. But no, the 8.3-inch screen on the iPad Mini is lovely for one-handed use. As I mentioned in my recent review, which I'll link to above, it is fantastic. It's my favourite device in terms of consuming content, but it's not really a productivity iPad. I wouldn't really sit down and write long blogs on this or do lots of email or do any kind of work stuff that I'd be more inclined to do on the iPad Air 4. So in terms of form factor with the screen size, this is easily a one-handed device, whereas the iPad Air, you do really need to use two hands to use it. So when making this decision between these two iPads, I think you should start with the screen size, and you've got to think, do you want something that is pretty much 80% a consumption device or a 50-50 consumption and productivity device? I can't answer that question for you, but you should know in your head which of those two scenarios best fits your life and work. Oh, and in terms of the screen, I talked about the jelly scroll issue on the iPad Mini 6 in my review about that. Again, it's linked earlier in the video, but I'll put a link in the description if you want to check that out. Basically, to save you some time, don't worry about it. It is a thing. Jelly scrolling does exist, but it shouldn't detract from enjoying this wonderful little iPad. The next decision to make is note-taking. Now, I purchased the iPad Mini 6 mainly for note-taking. That is the primary use case for this iPad, and so far it's been amazing. And if you pair it with the Apple Pencil 2, which is the best Apple Pencil ever made, it is just a dream. Obviously it attaches to the side and away you go. Now the Apple Pencil 2 also works perfectly with the iPad Air 4, but when it comes to note-taking, personally, these two devices feel very, very different. I am used to notebooks like this one here. I cannot pronounce this. I'll put the link to it in the description. But I love these kind of notepads, which I think are kind of A5 size, I think. Now, if we put this up against the iPad Mini 6, they're pretty much the same size, which is what attracted me to this. I don't particularly like taking notes on big A4 sheets of paper. I do it sometimes, but generally speaking, I want to take a notebook around with me that I can slip into any bag, put it on the table without it taking up half the table, and just just have something that is easy to take notes on. So the size of this for me for note taking really appeals. The size of the iPad Air 4 for note taking, it feels a bit more like an A4 pad. And if you love that kind of thing, if you love having a bigger canvas to write your notes on and sketch stuff out on, this is probably ideal. Arguably, you might find the iPad Mini a little bit too small for note-taking. For me, I just write notes. I don't draw things, I'm not a sketcher, and the notes I take are quite short, really. I don't take a load of notes each time I have a meeting, so I don't need much space, basically, which makes this perfect. But if you like sketching out big ideas and stuff, I think the 12.9-inch iPad Pro is a bit too big for note-taking, but this fits perfectly in between if that's your thing. If portability is really a thing for you, if you're out and about a lot on the road and, I don't know, you work in coffee shops a lot or you go to lots of client meetings and things like that, I think whipping this out of your bag is going to be a bit easier and less, I don't know, intrusive than whipping out a great big iPad Air 4. For me, personally, when it comes to note-taking, the iPad Mini 6 wins hands down. If you like a little bit more space to play with, the iPad Air 4 would work for you. Now, the last decision is laptop ability. Now, bear with me on this one. I know lots of people, and I understand why, don't like the idea of calling the iPad a laptop replacement. It's an entirely different paradigm. It's not the same type of computing as a laptop. But my argument with this has always been, as soon as you put an iPad in a Magic Keyboard case, like so, for a lot of people, I think for, I don't know, 80-90% of the people that have this setup, this to them is a laptop replacement because it has a screen, has a keyboard, and it has a trackpad. So to them, it's just a laptop experience. Now we know it's not the case. It's iPad OS, it's an iPad, it's a tablet. But for most people who use this, it probably has literally replaced a laptop. So if you're thinking between these two iPads, and one of the primary reasons you want to get it is for it to replace your aging Windows laptop or your MacBook or whatever it might be, then the iPad Air 4 is the obvious choice. A couple of reasons for this. One of them is the screen size. We go right back to the beginning of this video. Screen size is where you start. And if at that point you were thinking, yeah, I think the 8.3-inch screen on the iPad Mini 6 is going to be a bit small for me, then you're already heading in this direction. But also because if you're doing lots of work on it and typing things and doing email and writing stuff and working on spreadsheets and things, then you want as much screen real estate as possible. The other reason is, at the moment, you can't get a Apple branded, simple to use Magic Keyboard case like this for the iPad Mini 6. Now that might sound ridiculous, but I did make a case for this in a video that I did for Apple Insider recently, which I'll link to above. In that video, I explained that I'm not expecting to write War and Peace on this thing, but to have a mini version of the Magic Keyboard attached to this just for very quick email and perhaps a couple of bits of notes and things, and just very simple things when I need to type something on a physical keyboard, that's really appealing to me. But it still wouldn't be for me a replacement for a laptop. I've just noticed my logo's disappeared. Hang on. Disaster. So this would never replace my MacBook Air. This technically could, and actually does quite regularly. If I'm out on the road, I'll take this with the Magic Keyboard case and I can get pretty much everything done that I can get done on that laptop. Now you can still use this with trackpads and Bluetooth keyboards, but that's a bit of an odd setup really. You'd have to have them separate and you'd have to have some kind of way of standing this up. I know you can do that with the Folio case, but a bit of a messy setup. The setup with this and this is really, really neat and convenient. So if you're looking for some form of laptop replacement, it's the iPad Air 4, hands down. Now I can't tell you which one to buy out of these two iPads because it's a personal decision, but those three decision points that I've gone through in this video, I'm hoping will help you reach that decision. And you might be wondering now, which iPad out of these two would I keep? And actually, it would be the Mini. And the reason for that is that I'm pretty much wedded to my M1 MacBook Air. It's my favorite ever laptop. All I need alongside that really is a way to take digital notes. The fact I can do that on this so easily with the Apple Pencil, but also use it as a consumption, media consumption, YouTube viewing device, makes it a dream iPad for me. But that might not be your use case. Your use case might be to get rid of something like that and use something like this. Now, I've not talked about performance and battery life and all that sort of stuff in this because they are remarkably similar. Now, technically, this is a more powerful iPad than this one because the iPad Mini 6 has the A15 chip in it, so it's got a faster chip, again, in theory, than the iPad Air 4. But in reality, in everyday use, they feel identical in iPadOS. So spec-wise, don't worry about that. It's all about the screen, the note-taking, and whether or not you want to replace your laptop. So let me know in the comments, what are you going to go for? Is it going to be the iPad Air or the iPad mini? Now, if you want to see some more iPad related content from me, keep watching for a link at the end of this video to my iPad playlist. But in the meantime, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.